Oh, yes. What is interesting, when I was called into the briefing on Russia, and to make the peace plan, what was interesting, they showed me the KGB file on JFK, and it was about that thick. And then they said, "You do realize what we're asking you to do is why they took JFK out?" I said, "Yes, I know."
Allegedly, supposedly, but I was just in New York for the dedication of Dorothy Kilgallen Way. She was a female investigative reporter. I'm sure you remember her from the 60s. And she was collateral damage, shall we say, from the whole investigation. She had interviewed Jack Ruby twice. She was hell-bent on exposing the whole scheme. And basically, she had an accident and is no longer with us and hasn't been for many years. But guys like Mark Shaw and Gianni Russo of Godfather fame won't let her memory perish with her. So I was there at the dedication of Dorothy Kilgallen Way on East 68th Street. But it just made me think of your travails, your journey, and basically thinking about the whole government shutdown. What's the end result of the government shutdown? Is it a further erosion of trust in the government, or was this just all theater?
Last year at the WEC, a lot of people were kind of surprised, but I stood up and I said, "Look, the computer says the Democratic Party is going to split and eventually become, non-existent." Everyone went, like, "Oh my God, really?"
I remember.
And now I get emails like, "Your computer's right again." People don't realize, there was even the Democratic Republican Party of Jefferson was against the Federalists. The Federalists, disappeared. They lost. And then the Democratic Republican Party of Jefferson split into the Democrats and Republicans. So these things aren't unique or off the wall. And the computer is basically saying, "Hey, it's happening again." And just look at Schumer, for example. He is just desperate to hang on to power. And so he's been kowtowing to the left wing, the progressives or whatever you want to call them, who are just rapidly insane. It's their way or nothing. And they want absolutely no compromise whatsoever. And you even had Fetterman coming out and said, "This is completely unreasonable." And then you have a lot of moderate Democrats that are like, at the same time, they basically wanted to end the shutdown. But then they get yelled at by Schumer. And he's trying to walk a tightrope between the two camps that honestly hate each other at this point. So the computer will be right. It's not that, this is like Democrat versus Republican like when we were kids. This is different ideas, and you're seeing it in the Democratic Party, which is just so far to the left, and the other side is like moderate. I had Democratic friends that always voted Democrat, and they sent me, pictures of like all gender bathrooms and said, "You know who I'm voting for." When you start crossing the line, it just gets to be nuts. One friend who moved from New Jersey came down here, and his wife got a job in Gainesville, Florida, which is probably the farthest left community in
That's University of Florida is headquartered there.
And she quit. Why? Because they wanted to put pads in the rooms for children that think they're furries. Okay, so I'm going to hire these kids, and he's going to want a pad so he can take a leak alongside of his desk because he's a furry. I just,
You can't make this up, Marty. You can't make this up.
I know. How's like somebody, like that going to get a job in their life. If you kowtow to this, oh, okay, here's your pad. You think you're whatever you are, a rabbit or a dog or whatever. I don't know. I mean, look, kids make up things. It doesn't mean you have to, oh, okay, fine. You want to be a dog? Well, yes, you're a dog. I'll get you a leash, I don't know. I mean, what's going on here with society? It's, I mean, it's not unusual for kids to even have emergent, imaginary friends or something like that or whatever.
I had a whole bunch of them, but that was when I was 5,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
not at 68, It's insane.
I don't know. We have to understand that, you also have to move into society eventually. You need a job. And if you're not preparing them for that, then what the heck are you doing? It's, but I mean, this is what the computer is showing. It's like you hold your hand up in the air. No problem, but keep it there. Eventually you run out of energy. It becomes so heavy if you got to let it down. Everything works that way. There's nothing in this universe that doesn't function on a cyclical basis. You got brain waves, all right? When you no longer have a brain wave, you're dead. I hate to tell you, okay? And the universe, everything works in a cycle. There's nothing. It's how energy moves from one place to the next. Sound moves in sound waves. Light, it's also a wave. There's nothing that is exempt from this. And when I was in school, you went to physics class, and they would say basically what Einstein said: God doesn't play, dice with the universe. Nothing's random. And then you walked across the hall to the economics class. Oh, everything's random. So they can control it. They think, whatever. I mean, I was talking to Paul Volcker. I think it was back in 1999. And he had done a book, The Rediscovery of the Business Cycle, back in 79. And he knew about the ECM and everything. We had an interesting conversation. And he said, look, there's a business cycle. His book is called The Rediscovery of the Business Cycle. And if you read it, he says, we were taught about Keynesian economics for decades. It failed. Paul basically said, no, you're right. There's about an 8-year business cycle. The Fed chairman before him, Arthur Burns, he was the chairman when Bretton Woods fell. And his comment was the same. The business cycle always wins. And, yet you go to the academic side, and they come out with random walk theories, market efficiency, and they think everything is already factored in. Very nice. But then you get the external things from wars in Europe or whatever, which send capital here, and they don't understand it. You can't fundamentally, forecast the future of the economy simply by the numbers at the Fed. Doesn't work that way.
So this is a good time to mention that we've just dropped the next book, which picks up where The World According to Martin Armstrong left off at the Armstrong Economic Code, The 5 Truths Investors Must Never Forget. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and wherever fine books used to be sold. And in it, though, we've got basically a abbreviated score sheet. We would have needed 10 pages just to cover all of your forecasts that have come true, but we did the top 20 that we had there mentioned in our discussions there. Several of them were pending, and several of them were in the future, such as Dow 62,000, or I think we even said 65,000 by 2032. So there'll be a link in the show notes. You can buy it there, or just shoot me an email, KL@KerryLutz, and I'll send you the link. And kind of excited about this because it's coming out right when your World Economic Conference is coming out. And what can we look forward to? Like, what are your top 3 forecasts? We got the Democratic Party is toast, but what else can you tell us?
Look, this is going to be an interesting conference because first of all, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do many more of these. This is the 40th year. I mean, time does catch up to you after a little while, you know? But now at these, we cover all the markets from Asia to Europe, show the interconnections, you know, and like on the Dow, the computers come up and is basically saying the major high is probably around 2032. And I mean, short term, you get a correction, you're backing off. I mean, the same thing. It's more about understanding the world as a whole. You can't forecast a single market without looking at everything else in the world. Because the wild card always comes from the outside, you know, and you go to war in Europe, and all of a sudden you then see all the capital flowing here. I mean, that's what happened in World War I, World War II. You know, the 1929 bubble, it was all driven by, because all the capital was here, capital concentration, all right? The same thing happened in Tokyo in 1989. Everybody was there, all the foreigners were there buying. If you were a foreigner, you made more money because the yen was going up, plus the stock market. You made more money than the Japanese did. In 29, the same thing happened. If you were European, you made a ton of money on the stock market. It was like the automobile bubble, okay? Like AI bubbles or .com or whatever. That was the automobile bubble. So they're all investing in that, but also then the dollar went up. So a European made more money than an American did. And we have to understand that currency is a very important aspect. And, you know, when I was called back in 1985, they were creating the G5 and all of that. And I wrote to Reagan, I said, you know, people don't, you know, these people don't look at the world globally. They just look at the United States. And this idea of lowering the dollar by 40% to help the trade deficit. I wrote to Reagan, I warned him, I said, look, you're going to cause a crash in 2 years. And I spoke to some of these people and they said, oh, well, why? I said, because you just sold a third of the national debt to Japan. Now you're saying you're going to devalue the dollar by 40%, they're going to lose money. They don't understand the foreign exchange. You know, and so when the crash comes, then, okay, I'm called into that. But it's always the same thing. You know, they're called in by the Swiss over the peg with the euro. I said it's going to break. And it's, you know, they don't understand. And the same thing with Soros on the pound trade. All right, I try to explain to these people, you fix a currency. I can sell $1 trillion. If I lose, I get my money back because it's fixed. If I win, I make a ton of money. It's a one-side guaranteed bet. You know, and they just look at you and their eyes glass over. They just don't understand international markets. They really don't. And they don't learn from the past. You had the silver Democrats in the 1890s and stuff. And they thought if they overvalue silver, they'll force the rest of the world to accept their price. The rest of the world said, really? Well, how much more you want? You know, and all the silver came here. The U.S. was drowning in silver, and we lost all the gold. And that's when J.P. Morgan had to stand up, you know, and bail out the country in 1896. You know, with to get it up to 100 million in gold again. And you had William Jennings Bryan, thou shalt not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold, it's always the same thing. And that's what gets frustrating for me. It's not like an individual. You stick your finger in the flame of a candle, your parents may say, don't do it. You go, oh shit, that really hurt. Okay, you don't keep doing it and expecting a different result. But collectively, society doesn't seem to learn from its past mistakes. Every investigation I've been dragged into one way or another, it's always the same thing. Somebody steps up, oh, this is what we could try. Oh, that sounds good. Never have I ever heard, even one time, just a simple question. Has this been tried before? Did it work? You would think an intelligent person would ask that. They don't. They just don't. So, in forecasting, look, I've had offices around the world for decades, and mainly because we started primarily in foreign exchange. So, I got called into the first crisis, which was actually 1973, Franklin National Bank. And the floating exchange rate started in 71. The currencies were trading in futures for less than a year. Nobody understood hedging, anything back then. And so after that, every foreign exchange crisis I got called into. From forming the G5 to Asian currency crisis called in by China, called in by Europe to, and they're creating the euro. I've had a front row seat to every single one of these things. And I just see the same shit all the time. It's very frustrating. I feel like, not even picking up the phone anymore. Yeah, okay, fine. What are you going to do now? You're going to do this is what you're going to do. I feel like almost a card reader or something. I can tell you what you're going to say and when, because they always do it. It's very frustrating. But that's why history repeats, because human nature doesn't change.
Exactly. All right. So coming up, what do you think? We should probably do this part 2. And we will call this part 2, but coming up for part 2 here, markets. What are we looking at? Stock market, metals, gold, silver. Show us what the charts are saying.
Well, short term, you get, a correction. You got people thinking there may be peace. Gold's been going up mainly on the war scenario. Although I've been called in, and I think the proposal that I was asked to write, I think it even made from what I've been told, I think it even made the desk of Putin. And so a couple days later, Lavrov came out and said Russia was willing to guarantee they're not interested in invading NATO. Of course, NATO doesn't care. They want war anyhow, so it doesn't matter what they say. And the same thing in the Middle East. I'm not real optimistic of long-term peace deals. With Hamas, you have people that have been raised as a kid to hate Jews. They're not suddenly going to say, oh, okay, kumbaya, let's come over to my house for dinner. It's just not going to happen. And it's the same thing in Ukraine. You had Zelensky just come out the other day saying he's going to kill Putin. Trump even said his hatred of Putin is just unrelenting. And as I've said, I've had employees there in Kiev and in Donetsk. The two wouldn't even talk to each other. But it's systemic. It's almost like it's an ethnic hatred that they are also ingrained with from growing up. And you can't talk to them. I said, you realize that you're blaming Russia for all the starvation in Kiev. I said, do you know the truth? Stalin wasn't Russian, he was from Georgia. All right? Lenin even wrote a letter, do not let him succeed me. And in Russia, they believe that he may have even poisoned Lenin. His right-hand man was Kaganovich, who was actually from Kiev, and he was Jewish. And most real honest scholars of history think that he's the one that was in charge of taking the food from Ukraine. And they believe because Ukraine was killing all the Jews that it was retribution. So, but he was born in Kiev, so he was Ukrainian. He wasn't Russian either. But hey, we blame Russia. Yeah. So I don't see these things as being solvable. Even the employees we had from Kiev, when we had conferences in Greece, refused to fly back the quickest way because the plane simply stopped in Moscow.
So markets are being affected by war in the Middle East and in Ukraine. And so what can we look forward to for the next few months? Gold and silver are going to keep going up. We got silver back around $50, gold over 4,000. You mentioned last time when you were looking at the chart that when it hits 5,000, it could go to 10,000 very quickly.
Yeah, and I don't see that right now. I think that's more, once the perception of peace evaporates again, then it's going to be, back on. So you're looking at just largely some consolidation. I'm not looking for a crash in the stock market or gold or silver or anything of that nature. I've said that before. And we get a lot of these people, oh, look at that chart, it's got a crash, 1929. All right, they don't understand the capital flows. Just because it's up, it doesn't mean, look, halfway up 1929, they were calling, the same thing. I was going to crash. Kept going. And it kept going because of the capital flows. And that's what we have to pay attention to right now. 26 looks like to be a panic cycle year, not just in our war models, but also in the euro. Euro has been rising. Most likely, you're going to see 25 is the highest annual closing for the euro on this bounce. Then you're looking at it going down. It's once you start seeing the war over there, that first bullet flies, the capital is going to be running. So that basically you have to understand is underlying support for real estate in certain sections, and also not necessarily the blue states, but here in Florida, I still get phone calls, you want to sell your house at least every week. And the traffic is double what it was when I first came down here. I couldn't believe it. I moved to the West Coast because I didn't want to be near Miami. I felt I would be, excuse me, I would be spending, half my life in a traffic jam down there. Now I'm beginning to feel like it's starting to come over here. But, it's, a lot of people, you have international capital coming here, plus you have the flight from the blue states. And now you have Mandami in New York. Wall Street is moving to Boca Raton. Simple as that. Goldman's already moved its most profitable division. I know a lot of fund managers that I spoke to have moved. One of the biggest was paying over $100 million in taxes to New Jersey left. So you're getting domestic migration, and Mandami is free buses. Okay, you got people that sleep on the trains to begin with. All right, homeless people. Are you real it's not necessarily safe to use the subways. So now you're going to make the buses free, very safe. I don't know. Most of these ideas seem to be delusional at best. So the markets, I think, you're looking at some confusion short term. And then they're going to start, waking up probably the first quarter next year. But this is all going to be driven by international. That will be the main source of movement, and then you also have this domestic issue of migration from the blue states. I mean, just look at Newsom going to put in an exit tax. Instead of asking why are people, all right, let's punish the bastards. I mean, are you solving the problem with this kind of thinking process? We do, we'll just punish them if anybody wants to leave, so that will keep them here.
New Jersey did that, right? New Jersey has an exit tax. And how is that constitutional? It sounds like it's a violation of the Constitution where you got your free right to migrate and go wherever you want.
Yeah, no, listen, they wouldn't do these things if they weren't desperate for money. The fact that they are doing that is indicative of what I'm saying. The city of Detroit suspended its all debt payments in 1937, couldn't pay it. So they defaulted on their debt. They finally made good 1963. So they claim, see, we never really defaulted. 1937 to 1963? I think if you were in your 70s or 80s and counting on that for income, you died penniless.
Is that going to happen with New York? Are they going to default? I mean, I don't see any hope for New York because the media is still playing like Wall Street is still the financial capital of the U.S. and the world. You were the first one to observe that that's not the case, that effectively Miami, which Miami is from Miami up to Palm Beach, is the new financial capital of the country. So how does New York survive this?